so loud, like a church bell ringing. I see stars. My eyes are stinging. My choking voice and silence singing. I hit the ground. I saw you swinging. Come on back and make it easy. Come on back and break me down. Come on back and make it oh so easy. I miss the hurt when you're around. Rewind my mind like a film I'm seeing. I played the victim, it's a painful feeling. I wrote a new story, it's got a glass ceiling with you as a villain that left us all chilling. Come on back and make it easy. Come on back and take me down. Come on back and make it oh so easy. I miss the hurt when you're around. Carry on the family tradition. To hurt inside is my condition. To hurt outside became your addiction. So carry on, carry on. Carry on the family tradition. To hurt inside is my condition. To hurt outside became your addiction. So carry on, carry on, carry on. Come back and make it easy. Come on back and take me down. Come on back and make it oh so easy. I miss the hurt when you're around. I miss the hurt when you're around. I miss the hurt when you're around. I miss the hurt.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the world premiere of Building Trust in Science. Isn't that a good timing to be trusting science? A conversation in honor of the 18th annual Billie Gardner Loulan Memorial Virtual Benefit for Breast Cancer Action. Can you believe it's been 18 years? I'm Joanne Loulan. Billie was my mom. Thank you so much for joining us. Since we're still in this virtual world, I don't really know who's out there. Would you do me a favor and say hi in the chat while we get started? And don't be afraid to keep the chat going throughout the premiere. Say hi to each other, ask questions, make comments. We want to know you're here. I want to get started by thanking the rockin' band that just kicked us off, Dr. Sigmund's 100% All Naturals Band. What a way to start the show. Am I right? For those of you who don't know me yet, I used to be on the board of Breast Cancer Action, but finding that I was a better fundraiser than board member, I threw myself into hosting an annual fundraiser in memory of my mother, Billie Gardner Loulan, who died at 53. I still miss her, and in honor and memory of everyone affected by breast cancer. That includes myself, diagnosed twice, and I'm still here kicking and talking and screaming and kicking up a fuss as much as I can about what are the real causes of breast cancer and what can we do about it. Breast Cancer Action is an organization that is close to my heart. I actually am in love with breast cancer action. As Pee Wee Herman used to say, if you love it, why don't you marry it? I don't think that's a thing, but I can say that every day I can trust that BCA knows what to do, who to call out, what science is actually saying about breast cancer. No ivermectin on their list. It's pure science, humor, and love. So trust BCA. Give newly diagnosed folks their number, their website, and someone will answer and give them untainted information. Breast Cancer Action takes no money from anyone who makes money on cancer, even if they do something good. It's just the facts, ma'am, just the science. Usually at each event, I write what I call my essay. And this is the 18th anniversary. The second one, we haven't been able to congregate, connect, commiserate, and celebrate. These years of separation have done something not quite tangible, not quite real. We've been not quite connected. Such fabric of our community frayed, losing something like in a bad dream, we can't seem to get out of it. What day is it? When did this whole thing start? Did we lose 1 year or 2 years? Is this the third year or the second year? I know it's not the first year. That's about all I know. I actually got a text this morning from Stanford telling where the surgery patient was, out of pre-op and going to the next stage. And I had to think for a minute, do I know someone going through surgery who would have given my number? I do not. And trying to figure out, how do I tell this bot that I got the text from, where it says, don't text back, that I'm not the right person? Then I'm wondering, who is out there worried and not getting a text? We used to just be in the waiting area for the doctor to come out and tell us what was happening, watching that code on the LED boards in the waiting room about who our loved one was and where they were and moving around so we could see what stage they were in. So now out there somewhere is a drifty situation. Oh, just got another text. The patient is in the recovery area. So there's that. Thank you, COVID. Time has become so drifty. All our markers are drifty. Are we on Zoom? Do we come into the office? Are kids in school? Are they home? Can we go on that vacation? Is it stupid? Can we go inside to eat? Is that cold really COVID? If someone has a wedding and doesn't require vaccination, should we go? If we go someplace far away, should we isolate when we get home? A friend and I saw each other after 2 years and realized she had never seen me without my breasts, or so we thought, or so we believed. And then we thought, well, maybe we have. And I can't even quite remember, when did I have my breasts removed? It wasn't that long ago. When did I see her last? When did I see you last? When did you see anyone last? That, of course, impacts our health. There was an estimated nearly 1 million doctor's appointments that were missed during COVID that could have impacted a cancer diagnosis. Someone I actually know didn't go to the doctor and now has terminal cancer. Would that outcome have been different? I guess we'll never know. We'll never know. So many things. And community is so crucial when breast cancer is concerned. We just need support. We need connection, touch, to be able to cry together, to go someone's hospital room and bring flowers and candy. Because maybe you didn't know this, but you can eat candy and do whatever you want when you've got breast cancer. That other shoe has already dropped, so who cares? My mother, Billie, who died of this disease, was coming to see me in California from Ohio. She's in the airport, standing in line. Any of you that are under the age of 70, I'm sure don't remember this. You could actually smoke anywhere then. She smoked in her hospital rooms, as did her doctors. And she, in this line at the airport, was smoking her unfiltered Chesterfield. The man in front of her turned around and said, "You can get cancer from those." And my mother, not missing a beat, said, "I already have cancer and I'm dying of it." So that was my mom. She had to have a colonoscopy in one of her hospital stays. And don't ask me how, but she drew a bullseye around her bottom and then just laid back down. That was my mom. And she actually died talking. Just really how I want to go. Although I got breast cancer just 4 years older than her and that got it again 19 years later, I haven't died. So I keep talking just in case. Maybe I can out-talk it. Anyone who knows me knows I'll give cancer at least a run for its money. So now we're drifty and drifted and not connected and can't remember when we saw anyone last. We must tune into anniversaries of those who we lost, those among us that are currently suffering and scared, and they just need a call or a text or dinner put on their front doorstep or flowers. We must reach out through this fog in these times. And if you are one who is scared or being operated on or got a diagnosis of the C word, you just have to reach out through your fog too. It's not personal that your loved ones are drifted. They're adrift. We're adrift. Just text me. I'll text you back. We have a great program planned, and I'll get to that in a minute. But first, I want to take a moment to honor the memory of another former Breast Cancer Action board member who we recently lost. Many of you will remember Julie Morgan. She was a staple at my event and sometimes shared her writings and experiences with breast cancer with us. She was at my 15th, so 3 years ago. And I'm going to read from a tribute that BC Action posted soon after her death, written by our own Zoe Christopher, BC Action's program officer and operations manager, who just celebrated 15 years with the organization. She's the one that'll answer the phone if someone calls. This is her post about Julie. Julie Morgan came to volunteer with Breast Cancer Action in 2012. Having been diagnosed with invasive ductal carcinoma in 2011 at the age of 37. She was so interested in our work, and our staff fell in love with her humor, her wicked smarts, and her kindness. She joined our board of directors, where her expertise as a nurse and as someone having experienced breast cancer firsthand were invaluable and deeply appreciated. Julie sadly was diagnosed with metastatic breast cancer in 2017. And she spoke at this anniversary of my event very soon after, when she was actually very ill and in treatment. She was so vulnerable and so honest when she talked. She was fierce in her desire to make every day count, to make memories, to nurture her little girl as she grew up. But sadly, Julie died last November, 2021. We're honored to have known her and to have her have been part of her journey. In our own town of Portola Valley, we have many stories of losses of women of all ages, but many of those too young. And one of course, was our amazing Karen Tate, who we lost way too soon. Our dear community member, neighbor, friend, sister, daughter, wife, and mother. She died in her 50s in 2019 after a fierce fight herself. She left behind many legacies of her amazing self, including the Windmill School and so much more. Mostly her children are a gift to all who know them. Her daughter went running past me on the other day on our local woods trail, and I thought of how hard it must be for her brother, and her father. They're amazing in their own right. However, what a loss. Me losing my mother at 26 was hard enough. Losing Karen when those kids were almost in 7th and 9th grade. Whoa. I'm so mad. After all these 47 years after the death of my mother, after my last diagnosis, we're still talking about this damn crisis. But folks, we have to keep talking about breast cancer because it's far from over. It's always also makes me laugh when the pink ribbons come out to raise awareness of breast cancer. Seriously, anyone not aware of breast cancer? That's why, in honor of people like Julie and Karen and my mother, we get together to learn the most pressing issues in breast cancer every year, what Breast Cancer Action is doing now, and how we can help. Over the years, this event has raised over 1.5 million for Breast Cancer Action. All of you on this call, both those of you that are new and those of you who have been coming for 18 years, thank you. It means so much. Speaking of support, before we get to the premiere of Building Trust in Science, I want to introduce 3 people who have been gold star supporters of Breast Cancer Action over the years. Our match donors, Angela and Sam Shalais and Lori Woods. Angie, Sam, and Lori are matching all of your donations up to $20,000. That means that any donation you've already made or will make towards this event will be matched. They have also graciously offered to share with all of you why they support BC Action. Take it away.
Angela Chalais here. My husband Sam and I are so pleased to be a part of the breast cancer action community. Of course, we learned about this work 17 years ago through Joanne and her tireless efforts on behalf of the organization. I've been very fortunate myself not to have been diagnosed with breast cancer, but Sam and I both have been affected deeply by watching countless family, friends, and acquaintances who have suffered in varying degrees from this awful disease. BCA is an amazing organization working to educate people and influence policy. As a nonprofit leader myself, I am so impressed by what BCA can accomplish by putting your donations to work towards their efforts while maintaining a lean and efficient staff. Not only do they advocate for fair access to quality healthcare and provide amazing resources to those who are affected by breast cancer, but they also successfully advocate and affect environmental policy change and influence companies to avoid the toxic chemicals that cause cancer. And then there's one of my favorites, Think Before You Pink. Think Before You Pink calls out the profit-driven culture of pink ribbon marketing that inundates our landscape every October. They've successfully challenged some of the largest campaigns, such as Susan G. Komen and more. As we know, breast cancer is not pink and pretty, it sucks. Cancer sucks, and that money needs to go to research and not in the pockets of big corporations. For the past few years, we've partnered with the amazing Lori Woods to match all of your gifts to BCA. If you're joining us for Building Trust in Science, then you've already made a donation and we thank you. Please forward this to your family and your friends and let them know what the amazing work is that Breast Cancer Action is doing and encourage them to donate. Thank you very much for your support.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Woods, and I'm glad to be here today at the 18th annual Billie Gardner Loulan event. And I'm happy to be one of Breast Cancer Action's continued supporters. I have been a huge fan of BCA since I met Joanne about 10 or so years ago. I've loved learning about their unique model that sets them apart from other breast cancer groups because of the advocacy they do and how they take no donations from corporations and anyone whose products may be cancer causing. And I love that they shed light on the companies that pinkwash, who gain a profit from selling those cancer causing products under the guise of donating a portion of it to breast cancer research. Early in my relationship with BCA, I learned about the myriad BRCA gene patenting case where Breast Cancer Action joined with a bunch of other groups, professionals, and scientists representing more than 150,000 geneticists, pathologists, and laboratory professionals to challenge the legality of gene patenting, specifically the breast cancer gene. The Supreme Court passed a ruling basically confirming that no one can patent anything that's natural. That means no one's body parts, including genes. Well, internal genes, not your Levi's. And BCA was the only national breast cancer organization named as a plaintiff in the case. This group is extraordinary. I could go on and on about how this case imprinted itself on me and how it also imprinted Joanne, who was actually there in person in DC witnessing all of this happen. Because of their work and their many successes like this, I wholeheartedly believe in BCA. They are a small, lean, mighty team that is changing huge things to the better for breast cancer in our country. I'm happy to be joining Angie and Sam Chalais once again in giving a matching grant towards their fundraising today. And finally, a huge shout out to Joanne, who has put on these wonderful events in honor of her mother who struggled with breast cancer, along with other women in her family and her friends. I think of my mom and my aunts who had breast cancer and friends I know who have struggled with it for years and some who it's defeated. Thank you so much for putting on this event. And I'm so proud and happy to be joining you today. Thanks.
Thank you, Angie, Sam, and Lori, for all of your support over all these years. There are a bunch of other people I want to thank, the folks who have made this possible, everyone who already donated. And for those who donated at the $1,000 and up level, thank you so much. And I hope you're enjoying your happy hour box. Of course, if you'd like to donate more, use the link that's being dropped in the chat over and over, and the link that's behind me on the screen. We'll be sharing the video conversion in a few days as well. So please feel free to share this important conversation with your friends and encourage them to support Breast Cancer Action. And huge thanks to my partner, Ronnie, Beth, Sig, and Smitty in the Dr. Sigmund's Natural Band. So appreciate it. You guys are amazing. The Breast Cancer Action staff and board, some of whom are here with us this evening. I want to always say the staff is tiny and they make such an amazing difference in the world. And now I want to welcome and thank our special guests, Maimah Karmo, CEO of the Tiger Lily Foundation, and BC Action board member and public health expert, Tamatha Thomas-Haase. I can't tell you enough how excited I am about this conversation and why it's not enough to simply ask people in the breast cancer community to trust science, why science needs to build trust with people living with the disease, and what BC Action is doing to be the bridge between science and those on the forefront of this disease and people living with it. The conversation will be led by Breast Cancer Action's Executive Director, Dr. Krystal Redman, or KR, as they are known, rooted in their political lineage of grassroots organizing and fits right in with what Breast Cancer Action does, and toward activism with Black and queer liberation and health equity in the heart of LA. Dr. Redman centers their work in health justice, the liberation of folks who reside to deep in the margins and in reproductive justice, which we so need now, reproductive justice. Dr. Redman is a self-published author and a frequent speaker throughout sexual and reproductive justice and health justice movements, as well as in the public health sector. They bring over 16 years of experience in leading health promotion and disease prevention initiatives, as well as organizing towards equitable access, care, and treatment within community-based and centered programs. Prior to beginning her relationship with Breast Cancer Action, Dr. Redman has held executive leadership positions within public health and healthcare organizations. They also continue to lead a Southern-based reproductive justice health organization. Mainly her roles have centered on working to expand resources, information, health education, access to equitable care, and coverage to young people, women, and families. KR will introduce our two additional superstars in this conversation, Maimah Karmo and Tamatha Thomas-Haase. If you have any questions during the conversation, go ahead and put them in the chat. Someone on staff will get back to you. And now, without any further ado, let's get on with a world premiere of Building Trust in Science.
Wonderful. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, Joanne, for this introduction and really being here for this great event. We have an incredible, important conversation that's going to take place today. We'll be discussing today is how we can build a bridge between our communities and science in order to begin building trust, while also holding space for scientific accountability or accountability throughout the science movement. So as Joanne has said, my name is KR. I'm the executive director with Breast Cancer Action. And I would like to introduce two of my co-conversationalists that will be with me, joining me today. So first we have Maimah Karmo, who is the founder and CEO of the Tiger Lily Foundation. She was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer in 2006 and lived to become a leader in the women's health field, creating and carrying out national health initiatives for women and girls with the goal of eliminating disparities of age, stage, and color. Tiger Lily Foundation has launched national and global efforts focused on ending disparities, such as the hashtag Inclusion Pledge, which was a call for stakeholders around the world to recognize health disparities as a social justice issue. Which is kind of similar to a little bit of what we do at Breast Cancer Action, really bridging those gaps between social justice issues and the breast cancer crises. And our second conversationalist today is Tamatha Thomas-Haase. I believe, she, her pronouns. And Tamatha, as an independent public health consultant for 18 years, Tamatha believes that through intentional cross-sector engagement rooted in equity, transformative change of public health institutions, policies, processes is possible. Leveraging collective wisdom through artful group process is at the heart of her professional calling, and her 20-year history in public health has taught her the value of meaningful connection to others and their purpose. On November 6, 2018, Tamatha was diagnosed with stage 3 triple negative inflammatory breast cancer, a rare and aggressive breast cancer that accounts for about 1 to 5% of breast cancer diagnoses in the United States. Disparities in race and social economic status on IBC incidents as well as outcomes are well documented. Currently living fully with metastatic triple negative breast cancer, Tamatha is proud to join in service to Breast Cancer Action, Breast Cancer Action's compelling and urgent mission as a part of our board. So thank you both for joining us. We have some phenomenal people here to begin this very radical conversation. So really excited about that. So
Thanks
let's
for
just
having
talk.
us.
Oh,
Yeah, thank you.
absolutely.
By the way, I just your bio gave me chills, Tamatha, just hearing the words you use, which is about this conversation about, compassion, purpose. And that's why I do what I do. And so I look forward to KR's moderation, but just want to thank you for being you. And I'm also triple negative survivor as well.
Are you?
And
Oh, wow.
I am
Yes,
16
no,
years out.
I've read so much about your work and the Tiger Lily Foundation as well, and it is a complete honor and to be here with you today.
The
for sure.
honor is all mine.
Oh my goodness. Y'all are making my hairs on my arms stand up. And such, just to be able to foster us three fostering and creating this incredible space that is much needed. And you don't really typically get a chance to actually sit in a space like this where we can have such dynamic conversations about some of those parallels and some of the things that aren't really spoken about in the science field or research field or social justice field, like all these interconnecting variables, right? So I'm really excited that we have some dynamic people with us having this conversation, but also that we were able to create a space where we can actually just have this conversation and begin some of that work towards action, because it always starts with actually just that conversation, that piece of storytelling, right? So thank you both for that. So let's talk about what the issue is at hand. As we said, today's time is really to discuss trust, accountability, and science, and really just looking at what that history is and how we can move forward. So, many groups of people, including people living with breast cancer, are asked to trust science. It's like this immediate, quick thing, no underlying variables there, just trust science. Despite the fact that the medical industrial complex has a problematic and racist history, just to be clear, and is not taking transformative steps to build the trust that is needed. The history of medicine and science is rooted in the experimentation of Black and brown bodies and the profiting off of those bodies and communities. So that's what we mean by when we speak about the medical industrial complex and where the profit lies and things of that nature. And with a history such as that, with the roots such as that, to just kind of disclaim, hey, trust us, there's a little bit more work, a lot of bit more work that needs to go into that, right? And breast cancer, as we know, is a complex group of diseases that occur in a complex world. When a person is first diagnosed with breast cancer, often they are faced with an overwhelming responsibility to learn about their specific type that they face, with also overcoming responsibility to learn the stage that they're in with a breast cancer and treatment options, weigh the potential hazards and potential benefits, and the most informed decision, how they can move forward with their care. And then finally, the medical industrial complex is dominated by big pharmaceutical companies, as we know, federal agencies and research institutions that present the complex science of breast cancer with medical jargon, a lack of patient representation, or a lack of patient-centeredness in a lot of their jargon. Yet people living with breast cancer, their loved ones and caretakers are asked to just, as I said, trust their science. So finally, why should people, including communities of color and people living with breast cancer, trust an institution from which they have been excluded from and which they are not been represented, right? Not currently, not historically. And how do we trust the science of breast cancer treatment when science is general and in particular hasn't been trustworthy? So that's why we're here today to discuss some of those gaps. We've gone from acknowledging the lack of representation of communities of color, of different genders, of different just walks of life, folks that exist deep within those margins, or the voices of those living with breast cancers, to asking for participation and trust in science with no steps in between. So we're going to be here to talk about the steps in between, right? And the steps afterwards and all those different things. So I would like to invite you to join me in this conversation.
Yep.
Really just to discuss, let's start with the historical context and the impact. So can we touch a little bit more on, I touched a bit on the history of kind of like racism and experimentation and kind of all those kind of harms and hurts and traumas that is kind of just rooted in our science here in the US. And let's speak a little bit more about those historical contexts there so we can kind of frame the conversation today.
Yeah, I really appreciate your introduction. We hear about Tuskegee Henrietta Lacks cells that were stolen and monetized. People were experimented on. They were giving radiation in men in different, the syphilis experiment, trial, whatever they called it. There are things that have happened that have been horribly wrong with our healthcare system and scientific communities, but they're still happening, right? So when we would talk about history, what is history? And there's 100 years ago, there's 50 years ago, and there's 2 years ago, and there's today. So the issue isn't just what happened in the past, is that it's still happening. One of the reasons, with this spurred on this conversation was, I went to San Antonio Breast Cancer Symposium. I've gone many years, never invited as an advocate, just gone because I wanted to learn science. And when I would ask a question, I would be asked, are you a doctor? Or, and, what's your affiliation? And I would get dismissed. And I would look around and they'd be talking about the importance of the lack of Black women, involved in clinical trials, or lack of diversification in terms of treatment options, and people dying more of triple negative breast cancer, which is what I have, and which is found more often in Black women. But yet I'm looking around, there's just doctors in a room and no brown or Black patients. This happened to me year after year. So I said, well, why aren't there more patients of color here? And people would say, well, this is the conference for scientists. I'm sorry, Mr. Scientist, Mrs. Scientist, if you're working for me, why am I not in the freaking room? And so they were like, well, there's advocacy events happening, but this is the ballroom, this whole thing is for scientists. So I said, okay, I'm gonna just jack this all up. So I ended up bringing Black and brown women at the conference one year, and I took women of color, and I said, you're gonna be on the stage, and you, Mr. FDA, CDC, pharma sponsor, whoever, you will be in the audience. This is who the true expert is. And it totally changed the paradigm. People were leaving the hall, the great hall, to come to my meeting. And they saw the power of the patient voice, because there were things, what makes up science? It's the patient. The doctor is treating the cancer, but the patient has the body that has the cancer. So you have to build that trust by having a relationship, by having me to be involved with, why you're doing the research study, how to build a clinical trial, how to understand what I call like my key thing is, what is the truth about my lived experience and why I don't trust. So before you begin to tell me to build trust and build transparency, what is the truth about the past and the present? Can you lean into my truth? Let me speak my truth, learn from my truth. And can we be vulnerable about what has happened, what is still happening, before we go into, can I have your sample or specimen, or can you please take this drug? And so a lot of my work is around bringing patients to the conference now. We've done it for 3 years, and never happened before, 2019. We never had this large number of Black patients coming to San Antonio Breast. And then, but also saying, before I trust you, you have to hear me. You have to know my lived experience. You have to know where I'm from. You have to know that anybody in a uniform for me, whether a uniform that's white or blue, is one I don't trust. You know, even me living in one of the highest per capita incomes counties in America, I experienced health inequities living in a high per capita access area where I've been asked questions no one should be asked because of the color of my skin. And so it's really about building that open conversation, but demanding that our voices are heard, right? No one's going to say, come to my table. You have to say, I'm coming with my own table and my own chair. I'm going to sit down by myself and you can come sit with me and we're going to co-curate together. I think that's how you first start off building truth and trust in science.
That's so powerful. I completely agree. And maybe I should also say that part of this conversation is kind of the aftermath, or what is the dust, like this dust that's settling after SABCS from last year. I had the honor of attending a panel that you moderated. And yeah, and myself and our program manager, Jayla, we wrapped up SABCS as attendees and wrote 5 pieces, op-ed pieces, or blog pieces rather, around, SABCS. And one of my takeaways, because this was my first year, last year was my first year attending. And, as a researcher, scientist in one lens of my work or whatnot, but also as an advocate, also as a person who has multiple identities that are historically and currently marginalized, all these different things, right? So in coming into the space, one of the things I realized was they spoke a lot about race, right? Like race and just a little sprinkles of like justice, social justice, this and that, or not even those words, but health disparities, et cetera, right? But then what was missing was the word and the intention around racism, like history and what's led us to here. And there was a lot of conversation around trust in science. And we sat there and we're like, but there's something that's missing, right? Like we can't just say there's all these different differences and outcomes and treatment and diagnoses and all these different things and participation within clinical trials that differentiate between, racial groups, but we don't speak about what is the underlying variable there.
Right, you're right. I mean, we got to call people out. Racism is a real issue. It's a real issue, and it's why we still have redlining in communities that don't have access. It's why there's still food deserts. It's why even I, as early as last year, was asked when I went to the ER with the anaphylactic reaction, was I a druggie or alcoholic? It's why there are patients that I serve today who have asked for mammograms for 6 years and that told to wait for 6 years till their nipple is bleeding before they get access and they're now metastatic. So it's a real issue and it's uncomfortable, right? We don't want to talk about it. To your point, we discussed the things that are PC and it's hard because as a Black woman who kind of pushed that conference to happen, I'm in a place where I can like leverage my position and my power and my influence. But then there are people on the other side who are not used to having us at the table, who are like, well, this is great, but can you kind of figure out how to like control the room? And I'm like, no. And so it really takes people to really push the envelope. To be honest, it's whereas it was a great platform and I'm happy to have co-curated and there's still that need, there's still that sense of like people trying to manage how we speak our truth. And so, one thing I did was I said, I'm not going to coach my panelists. I want to have the Black and brown patients on the stage or in the chat box, but I'm not going to coach them on what to say. It's not about your comfort level. It's about the truth of what we're dealing with in mistrust. And so before you go into asking me to trust you, can we discuss the things that are bothering me? Can we discuss, to my earlier point, being vulnerable about the things that are still inequitable in our system? And I think people are afraid to hear that. I think that we, with the murder of George Floyd, we discussed a lot of those things that weren't comfortable. And people who are allies are fatigued. I had a white friend of mine say to me, I don't know how you do this. I've been since the murder of George Floyd, I've been advocating, supporting you. I've been speaking, I've been sharing and posting, but I'm tired. I said, well, that's nice that you're tired. I said, I can't afford to get tired being Black. I cannot say I'm tired wearing the skin that I'm in and leave my house or tell my daughter when she goes out at nighttime, do not wear a hoodie. If the police stops you, don't do so and so. If you go to the doctor without me, here's what you have to ask for to be your own advocate. And so to your point, I think we have to push the needle, because there's still that these things happen, but there's people are getting kind of the energy that we heard before. is kind of like lowering towards this issue, and it cannot be lowered because, as a matter of fact, Black women are dying at a 40% higher death rate than their white counterparts. In communities, 20 communities around the country, there are still high areas of vulnerability for underserved populations.
You bet. You bet.
And Tamatha, I
Yeah,
want
Tamatha, what do you think? Yeah, because I'm just talking
No.
away here.
No, this is, it's all so true. And I guess, as I was thinking about this portion of sort of what we were going to talk about, it's important to remember that science doesn't only have this incredible sordid history of abuse in terms of the eugenics movement and Henrietta Lacks and the Tuskegee, but science was used to justify racist policies for centuries. So science at its core is responsible for so much of essentially what we see today. And there hasn't been, in my opinion, a fair enough reckoning within the medical establishment, it's a scientific establishment, a reckoning with that history. Yeah, I feel like so much of what we see today is so deeply rooted, and any of the solutions that we try to bring to bear absolutely must account for those.
and thank you for
You're
naming.
right. There's lack of accountability. Like, no one's penalized for not ensuring that we meet these metrics around getting Black women in clinical trials. Since the murder of George Floyd happened, there's a tension towards trials and equity. There's no benchmark for, if you don't do this by this time, you lose your funding, you lose your license, you lose your whatever. Doctors aren't penalized, nor are nurses, so racism will continue until there's a measurable action taken to say, this is not done. We're going to make incentivize or disincentivize for whatever it is, right? So I think that if it's general, it won't happen. It has to be a SMART goal formatted, right? So it's really, people should be accountable to lose something. But also, to your point, Tim, that it's ingrained. I had a woman that called me who was in her 80s, who said it's a friend of mine. She said, I didn't know I was racist. I didn't know that I was until the murder of George Floyd. There are things that people like you, I was taught to believe about people like yourself and not associate with up to a certain point. And there are things that we do in medicine that we thought were right because we just thought, well, their skin's different, their hair is different, they're different people than us. And
they
so
have different pain tolerance. They have different, like all of those things that were used to justify these malicious experiments, right?
Yes. So then my question is, because we're hitting on it too, and we're getting to kind of, as a viewer, I'm wondering if folks are like, okay, so then now what? Whose responsibility is it to build trust? Like, now that we know, let's just say, folks are now taking the time to learn more about history of the science, and their eyes are opening up, right? Then the question of, well, whose responsibility is it to build the trust? Like, whose responsibility is it to hold folks accountable, right? And I also want to phrase this. We're talking about the medical industrial complex, the scientific and medical community, right? Research community at large. And also what makes up community is also individuals too, as well, So we're not asking folks to take on this mountain of an industry. And I mean, that'd be great if you have the capacity and the ability and the power and the privilege to actually do those things and organize and begin to shift power and build and change, do some policy change work and things of that nature, but also on an individual level, whose responsibility is it to build trust? And I think, I'll spin the question off to you two of, who do you feel needs to kind of lead these conversations in building the trust and holding folks accountable?
Well,
I think, unfortunately, those who are in power, there's a system in place to keep them in power, right? That privilege they have, they like it. And I think that what we've been doing is disrupting that system, that those who have more and protect it more. And they want to keep that in place. I'm sorry to say. I've seen groups, and it's daunting. It's really broken my heart because I've seen groups that I thought were making change, but I wonder if some of this change is performative change, right? To make themselves check that box, to say I can't be left behind or be perceived as being non-engaging with this, health equity movement.
Mm-hmm.
Having said that, I feel like there's tremendous power in advocacy. When I began Tiger Lily, I was in treatment. I was a single parent. I have a 3-year-old. I worked a full-time job, and I just looked at all the things that happened to me that would have caused me to die and not be here 16 years later. And I said, holy freaking what WTF? What can I do? So I began to use my voice. I never imagined I'd be here 16 years later running a national and growing global organization. And so I thought, how do we force multiply this? I believe in the power of one, that if one person has the passion and commitment and the drive to do something, everything's possible. So one of our programs trains women of color in communities that are underserved to be able to advocate for themselves, to know what to do about whether it's from breast cancer, screening to policy to whatever. We also train them to go on the Hill and lobby. We're having our lobby day next week. We bring them to scientists and we say, challenge scientists. They're only a person that had a degree and some experience, but your experience as a body that has had cancer and has cancer, how can we challenge that system? And so we also launch our inclusion pledge, which to your point, who wants to do all this? But I do. I think that, I believe in the quote by Mariam Wright Edelman. It says, service is the rent we pay for a living. So if you're breathing, your privilege is to use that breath to make a difference and use that privilege as power. People are dying of cancer because you're not acting in one way. So I ask people, what gift can you put in place? What can you use as your talent to change the landscape? So the power of one is important. You start off telling your story. Tamatha's story is so powerful, right? My friend Shantae's story, dismissed for 6 years, now she's metastatic. And there's many other like that, women who don't know their backgrounds, history of their families, and because we didn't discuss our history in the Black culture a lot, we're afraid of hearing about certain things. We're afraid of scientists and research. So how do we discuss what's happened and what our opinions and our truths are and overcome that to then build the nirvana of healthcare, of research science, and the next level of solutions? And I think that we have to push scientists, researchers, policymakers, people in regulatory, like FDA, CDC, because they work for us, really.
Yeah.
And so how do we come in there with assume our power and really work to overcome those barriers that even them who want to help still have a fear of us disrupting their systems. But unless we change what's been done, we're going to get what we always got, which is not working for Black and brown people still.
And
That's
Tamatha,
right.
I didn't know if you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I guess just a couple of things. Whenever I'm being asked to trust someone, it's always best if we're on equal footing, right? If the relationship isn't only transactional, like they want something from me, so they're coming to me. So reckoning, I think, with the power dynamics of these relationships is critical. And we've touched on some of that. Coming to me on my worst day with a magic wand isn't fair. It means that I'm going to make decisions with fear at the center. So I think we have to help scientists, we have to help physicians better understand the most appropriate engagement methods for people in crisis, especially if we're talking about recruitment into clinical trials. Are there better engagement points? Are there better messages, better messengers, disseminating information to communities through organizations they do already trust, working with those organizations in community to build their trust so they feel okay advocating for mainstream medical institutions. I think we also have to acknowledge the push and pull between scientists and individual oncologists. Often oncologists just want you to get started on treatment as soon as possible. They don't want you waiting around to see if you qualify for a trial and all of the testing that goes with determining eligibility. So they're pushing you oftentimes into treatment. And so sometimes patients may want to get into a trial, but they have to try to find one on their own. You may also have a doc that doesn't know anything about clinical trials or isn't able to fully explain them, or because of bias assumes you aren't interested, which they are finding in the literature, that individuals, physicians aren't letting women of color know about clinical trials or people of color know about clinical trials because they're assuming that they aren't interested because of all of the historical things we talked about earlier. So how can we make clinical trial information more accessible to communities so participation is not dependent on an oncologist's support? And then I just want to mention, of course, which Maimah did touch on, I saw an Instagram post yesterday from a person who I follow and she has cancer, and she's in a study that requires her to go into a hospital every month so they can test her cognitive function. And she's historically been able to get these appointments lined up with her monthly check-ins with her oncologist. But lately they haven't been able to accommodate her. So it means another day off of work, another bus route. She's tired. She's suffering from side effects from treatment. She's waiting over an hour to be seen when she gets there. Cancer is a full-time job in and of itself. Being part of a clinical trial, getting treatment shouldn't add to the burden to the extent that it often does. But we have a long way to go in terms of building trust, and I think patients have certainly, those living day to day with this disease, we have a lot of things to say that people need to hear.
Absolutely. And thank you both for that. As I think about what you two have said here, I also think about, the push to put blame or to put the responsibility of trust building on the individual and on the patient, much to a lot of kind of this tone of the responsibility of like getting cancer and your outcomes are individualized too as well. Maybe it's because something you didn't do or you didn't do enough of, or, all these different things, right? And it's just this individualized focus of where, the trust should start with the individual patient, just, trust me, or the individuals, right? And it's so much while you're trying to navigate your diagnoses and your treatment and life at the new life as you know it, right? So I want to be clear that the task and the responsibility of trust building is not on the individual patient, right? Like the medical industry at large has to take accountability by having these dynamic conversations and taking an intentional approach to inviting folks into those conversations to lead those conversations, not to listen, not to just say, okay, we've had this conversation, come along with us, but to actually have some intentional relationships, starting with intentional conversations. I believe both of you have hit on this around storytelling, because storytelling is qualitative data. Lived experiences is data, right? So like using that as part of the roots of this relationship building and listening. So I think, as we wrap up, we have like a few minutes left. I want to kind of close out by maybe some possible solutions or interventions we can offer our audience around steps towards building trust and holding our medical industry and science accountable.
So I think in terms of clinical trials, what I'll say is, I'm on Trodelvy, a targeted chemotherapy that's used to treat advanced stage triple negative breast cancer. Black women, as you said, Maimah, are twice as likely as white women to be diagnosed with triple negative breast cancer in the US. But get this, 7% of Trodelvy trial participants were Black. So it's one thing for me to be asked to trust that this drug is going to work for me, that the side effects are going to show up and present in this way or that way. But it is a completely different thing to ask a Black woman to have the same trust about that drug. And so first off, just say it, just be transparent about the fact that you have not done your due diligence on the women who are mostly affected by this disease as triple negative, as showing up as triple negative, as you must absolutely have been. The other thing is to be accountable to that lack of transparency. Encourage, require. There's a difference between encouraging and require. So why not require clinical trials to include diverse participants for new treatments to be approved? Don't fund clinical trials that don't require diversity among participants. Yep. Many clinical trials are partly or entirely conducted in other countries that have a totally different racial and ethnic makeup in the US. I was searching through the literature, as I've been known to do, to prepare for our conversation today, in clinical trials that led to FDA approval of 18 new cancer treatments in 2020, so this is not old data, 59% of participants lived outside of the US. So science must admit that there are significant gaps in knowledge, gaps in science, actually, for people of color when it comes to breast cancer screening and treatment and side effects of those treatments. So this is what having that limited participation in trial really means. It's how people live. It's the lived experience that follows the lack of inclusion in clinical trials and testing. It's sort of how things show up in real life. And it's not okay.
And Maimah, any closing additions? We probably have about a minute or so left.
I have a minute left. It's not possible for me to talk, and I'll do my best. For me, one last word means a whole sentence. Okay, so a whole paragraph. I will say that we have to just flip the table over, like flip it, because generally it's been the paradigm that, the FDA, the CDC, the HHS, all these governing bodies make up these different policies, and then they tell us what's going to happen. And they tell us everywhere from the time you're a child, here's what the guidelines say to get this screening, that screening. Here's when you can be offered a clinical trial when you're metastatic, right? That's what it was told before. Here's when you have to, so there are all these things, and you can't get breast cancer screening before you're before you're 45. Things like that is what's been done historically. But what about we put the patient first? Before there's any kind of guideline, there's patients involved. Before there's any kind of trial, we're involved in the protocol development, the research question, protocol development, site selection, training. We're part of training people on the sites how to be more patient and culturally competent. They have to understand our race and what we've been through, and then maybe their innate racism or lack thereof, right? I think this healing is a two-way street. People have been blissfully ignorant for a long time, and it's okay to be uncomfortable, because that's what takes growth, right? You don't grow when you're comfortable. You grow when you're pushed like a diamond. You're pressed and you grow. And so I think putting patients first, and that's why for us, our angel advocacy program has been so important. It should be more than 5 or 10 Black patient leaders in this country that are called upon to represent all the time. I think that with that, holding people accountable to create change, and saying that versus having this top-down approach to you guys are governing and we're down here, why don't we help you co-create solutions by leading with you? I think that's the new way that we're going to go. And we've been doing a lot of that, creating trained patient advocates, and then really working with them to drill down in the communities where there's lack thereof and lack of support and resources, to have them lead within industry, within clinical trial development, within building trust as a community-based leader, right? And so I think that's where we're going with the change. And I love the words you both have used. It's about community. It's about, heart-based passion. We can't do this by ourselves, and the system is only comprised of people. It's not a thing that's called a system. It's all of us that makes the system up. So how do we dismantle what's not working and beautifully put together what we can put together to see better outcomes for people who are Black and brown that need, deserve, and should have equity in healthcare and have trust in science.
Beautifully put, both of you. And something that you said as you were closing was dismantle and beautifully build. I always say dismantle, disrupt, rebuild, right? Like, have the gall and just the radical lens enough and courage to challenge, dismantle, disrupt, and rebuild. Like, we can absolutely rebuild something that just works equitably for all of us, right? So thank you for this conversation. I think as a part of this conversation, we know that there is a strong emphasis on asking people of the breast cancer community to trust science. This is the conversation we had today, but especially members of this community who have a justifiable, deeply rooted reason to distrust science, so that's kind of where we're sitting here, and that science in itself also serves and includes the population that science is for, and needs to begin to focus on their efforts to actually take in accountability. So some of the things that you two have mentioned mention here as we close, I want to just uplift that these kind of interventions or solutions, that these gems that we're offering our audience here to begin to really just think about is and work through is we can achieve this collectively through acknowledging history, some of which was named here today. And if you're unfamiliar with history, or at this point where you want to dive deeper into it to gain a greater understanding, I encourage you to do that work. That labor does not belong on anyone, specifically folks living with breast cancer, BIPOC folks, queer folks, etc. Right, folks that
Thank you.
deep within those margins. If you want to learn more, I encourage you to do that work and research of knowing more. It also includes transparency and accountability. Points here, I'm going to just name it as mutual engagement and mutual effort, and also providing equitable care and allowing our personal stories and lived experiences to be honored as data, right? And our truths. So these are the initial steps it takes to begin to build a trusting relationship. And when we speak about trust and accountability, we're speaking about relationship building, because we cannot begin to do this work of addressing and ending the breast cancer crisis until we begin to build trust, which means that we need to be in relationship with each other. So thank
Love
you.
that.
Love that. And I would just add, Krystal, people, mostly, honestly, white people with privilege are going to have to share some power.
Yes. Yes.
And maybe not only share it, but give some of it away.
Give it away.
That's the only way it's going to work.
Absolutely.
And that is part of the reckoning. When we say reckoning and when we say rebuilding, that's what it looks like. And it's going to have to be that way if we truly are about equitable care and equitable resources.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Beautifully put. And I appreciate both of you for sharing this time with us.
It was so fun.
Yes.
I want more time. We need an hour or so, to get through everything, but this is beautiful.
Do I
So
hear a
much fun.
part two coming?
Yeah.
A sequel?
Roadshow, perhaps?
Yes. And so for our viewers, you know very well how to contact us at Breast Cancer Action. Thank you for being supporters. And for our viewers that may be new to the Tiger Lily Foundation or interested, is there a website you would like them to visit so they know how to connect with your foundation?
Thanks for asking. So our Instagram is Tiger Lily Cares. I'm sorry, Twitter. Our URL is www.tigerlily.foundation.org. And then our Instagram is tigerlily_foundation. And you can find me at Maimah Karmo on any place, anywhere, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It's Maimah Karmo, and you can find me. So thank you all so much for looking us up in advance.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Maimah. And thank you so much, Tamatha. You too. It was such an honor to have this conversation.
Wonderful. My heart is full.
Yes, mine too. What a great day.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Take care.
Namaste. God bless.
Bye.
Okay.
Be well.
What an incredible and important conversation. Those women are unbelievable. So many thanks to Maimah Karmo, Tamatha Thomas-Haase, and to BC Action's Executive Director, Krystal Redman. The work you all are doing has to create a more just world for all. And thank you all for joining us and for your support. BC Action literally cannot do the work without you. As I said before, they take no money from anyone that makes money on breast cancer. And again, even though it's good, and there's lots of good out there, it just means so much to me that you are joining me in supporting them. And finally, a world of thanks to Angie and Sam and Lori for your unending generosity. You three blow my mind. Now that the world premiere of Building Trust in Science is over, I have a couple more things to ask of you. Take a few minutes to explore BC Action's fabulous new website. It's at bcaction.org. You can find resources, information, and always take action. It's not enough to just click a button. All right there. The Building Trust in Science conversation will be available soon on BC Action YouTube channel. Please share it with anyone you think would be interested or would benefit from this information. And please encourage them to join us with a donation to Breast Cancer Action. They can donate at www, we're all used to that one, .bcaction.org/donate/Loulan 2022. And now, to close us out, please join me in welcoming back Dr. Sigmund's 100% All Naturals Band. And thank you all. And I hope to see you in person this year. And I hope that's the last time I have to say that.